Tonight's story isn't fiction. It comes from the shadows between memory and fact, places where silence can hide what we're not meant to see. This is Midnight Horror Society, dark curiosity for sleep, real stories told in a calm voice. Let the sound of the night, rain, crickets, or just the quiet of your room settle around you. Get comfortable. And when you're ready, let's step into tonight's story. I don't think anyone who spends real time with the Dyatlov Pass case walks away the same. Some mysteries shrink when you get close. This one grows teeth. You push into the facts, and the facts push back. Nothing resolves cleanly. If anything, the picture gets colder, wider, and stranger. It begins in late January 1959, when 9 experienced students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out for a winter trek in the northern Urals. They were certified for the difficulty. They logged their route. They carried extra food, extra layers, spare skis, a stove that could be assembled inside the tent. They took photos for fun and for records. They kept diaries. They joked. These weren't tourists flirting with danger. These were people who respected it and knew what to do in it. The leader, Igor Dyatlov, was methodical. Among the team were radio engineering students, a construction student, a physics student, strong skiers, and a woman who had completed a previous expedition through terrain just as cruel. If you want to know what competent looks like in snow, look at those journals: efficient breaks, organized chores, little rituals that keep morale tight, songs, teasing, hot food when possible. You can feel the discipline without anyone ever needing to say the word. They advanced toward a mountain the local Mansi people called Kholat Syakhl, often translated as Dead Mountain, though the name's nuance is debated. Weather worsened. Whiteout conditions toyed with direction. They ended up camping on an exposed slope instead of down in the forest's shelter. It wasn't reckless. It was a decision strong hikers can make when visibility collapses and daylight is disappearing. You accept wind for the sake of a fixed reference point. You trust your tent, your stove, your team. And then, in the dead of night, something collided with that trust. When searchers eventually found the tent, its canvas was slashed open from the inside. That's not rumor. It's in the investigative materials. Boots were left behind. Coats were left behind. 9 people who had drilled winter survival did the one thing winter survival tells you never to do. They left shelter under lethal cold without dressing properly. Footprints, some barefoot, some in socks, some in a single shoe, led down the slope toward the tree line. Not a stampede, not chaos carved into snow. The track line read, for a distance, like people moving quickly but in control, as if whatever sent them out was urgent but not yet allowed to shatter order. And then the tracks disappeared into wind-scrubbed crust and the darkness of the forest. At the edge of that forest stood a massive cedar. Beneath it, searchers found the first bodies, 2 of the hikers without shoes, wearing only light clothing. Their hands were abraded, bark under their nails, evidence that they had climbed the tree, maybe to break branches for a fire, maybe to gain a view back upslope to the tent. To the slope, to whatever it was, they decided they could not face inside fabric walls. A small fire had been built there. The heat was not enough to save them. Between the cedar and the tent, searchers found 3 more. Dyatlov and 2 others in positions that read like motion, headed back uphill as if the calculation had changed and the tent was once again the better odds. They fell short of it by dozens of meters, then by fewer, then by a handful. Snow turns distance into cruelty. The final 4 weren't found until months later when the thaw loosened snow's grip. They lay in a ravine, Down a slope from a crude shelter, the group had begun digging. Those four had taken on the most serious damage. Fractured ribs, a skull injury, internal bleeding. On some of the remains, there was soft tissue loss. The tongue of one hiker, the eyes of two. Consistent with bodies lying in running water and under snow for weeks. Consistent with post-mortem change, but still stark in the morgue notes. No defensive wounds that screamed human attack. No bullet or blade. No sign of a fight in the tent. No prints of outsiders in the snow. The state closed the file with a phrase that became infamous. The group died due to a compelling natural force. A sentence that names nothing and suggests everything. An answer that functions like a door. It closes. But the artifacts did not close. The rolls of film, the notebooks, the track patterns, the positions of the bodies, the repairs on the tent, the clothes scavenged and shared among the group in their last hours, the stove in its bag, the food half prepared. These are the details that keep tugging at anyone who looks. There are rumors that attach themselves to this case like burrs. Some repeat, get smoothed by retellings, become facts by repetition. You've heard a few. That the team was stalked by something inhuman. That the diaries ended with a chilling line about a snow creature. That bodies glowed. That the government knew and silenced. Here is what is actually in the historical material, sifted from the louder echoes. One diary contains a line, written playfully, earlier in the trip, not as a solemn final entry, that says, "We now know that the snowmen exist." It reads like a joke between young people moving through a landscape where local legends are part of the air. It was never proof, never prophecy. To bend it into a foreshadowing is to twist it away from what it likely was, a laugh, a wink at folklore, scribbled in a notebook because people who respect danger also make room to tease it. Some of the clothing carried trace radiation. The origin has never been firmly established. Possibilities include contamination from a workplace, several team members had industrial internships in prior years, or a source encountered earlier, long before the trek. It is not a signature that forces the case into conspiracy. It is a small, odd note that sits in the margins and refuses to become the melody. Witnesses mentioned an unusual orange-tan coloration of the skin at funerals. Bodies recovered from snow and water often display chemical changes in tissue and hair. Funerary preparation can exaggerate tone. That detail is not a key so much as a shadow. It changes nothing about what the snow recorded. And what the snow recorded is this: 9 competent people, in the middle of a winter night, decided that to stay inside was riskier than to leave. They cut their way out, not because they couldn't find the flap. There is no evidence of a jammed zipper or blocked door, but because speed had become more important than neatness. That's a decision you make when options collapse to 2 and one of them is immediate. What forced us that? That is the heart of Dyatlov. If you play the night forward with the details we have, a picture emerges in the only language the case allows. Probability, not certainty. They are in an exposed position on a slope. The wind has built a protective lip of snow above. The temperature is brutal. Someone notices a deformation in the snowpack they hadn't seen when they pitched the tent. Maybe a cornice beginning to creep. Maybe a slab that's subtly detached and settled after they cut a platform. In shifting wind and low visibility, a slab of hard snow can load silently. A small collapse could batter the tent, bend support poles, pin parts of it. Air and space shrink from inside a sturdy envelope to under a cold, heavy ceiling. If you think another slab is about to come down, you don't take 5 minutes to lace boots. You open a fast exit. You remove the one barrier between you and breathable space. You cut. They pour out in socks, in a rush of cold so pure it grabs the lungs and claws every patch of exposed skin. They try to stay together as they move downslope, because the tree line promises two things the mountain does not: shelter from wind and fuel. It is only a few hundred meters, but in that temperature, with that wind, distance is something different. The group keeps moving, keeps count, keeps voice, until the air steals those too. At the cedar, they do what people do. They try to make a fire. They break branches. They climb for more. Bark under nails reads like desperation, but it can also read like do anything that keeps heat moving toward hands, toward faces. The fire lights. It's small, stubborn, inadequate. 2 die there, near its ghost. The others split tasks the way teams do when decisions are forced. Some begin a snow shelter farther into the trees, digging a den in the ravine bank where wind is strangled and air would be stiller. Others try to return to the tent, because if you can reach it, you can live. You can wrap yourself in down, you can get the stove lit, you can last until morning and reconsider a route in daylight. They angle uphill and the cold punishes movement with swiftness. Dyatlov falls. Another farther upslope collapses, then another. They are found later in positions that look like reaching, like trying to crawl against the angle of the mountain. That is a picture of calculation, of trying to choose the least impossible path, and losing a race that human bodies are bad at in that kind of night. Down in the ravine, the others finish part of a shelter, snow stacked, branches laid. Then the edge gives way. You don't need a roaring avalanche to break a chest. A heavy block of dense, cohesive snow can do it when it drops into a narrow confine. It can crush without leaving the kind of external bruising you'd expect from a blunt object, especially when snow distributes force and clothing pads the skin. Those injuries recorded in the morgue, the ribs, the skull, are violent, but they can be explained by a fall under a snow slab into a gully. Cold finishes what trauma starts. When morning inches into the forest, there is no one left alive to revise the plan. If you stop there, the case is bleak, but not extraterrestrial. But Dyatlov does not reward stopping. It invites second looks. Each time you take one, more data enter the room. Katabatic winds, dense air spilling down from higher ice, can generate a sound like pressure in the skull, an oscillation that makes people feel watched when nothing is there. Infrasound has been proposed as a fragment of the night, the way some storms create deep notes that stir dread in animals. It's not proof. At best, it is the color of the air. What fear might have ridden in on. Military testing is often floated, parachute mines or flares. Some locals reported lights in the sky around that time. The group's last photos include streaks and bright shapes that could be long exposures of flares, or could be camera artifacts, or could be nothing more than the way cold fingers press a shutter and smear a star. There are no blast patterns at the site, no shrapnel, no burns consistent with explosive proximity. If the military was in the region, its footprint didn't leave on the ground we can still read. Paradoxical undressing, when severe hypothermia confuses the brain and makes skin feel burning hot, gets mentioned because of the light clothing. But the record shows a more human, heartbreaking pattern. The living took layers from the dead, a grim, rational act. There is evidence of that in the way garments were found on the final four. It doesn't point to madness. It points to people thinking clearly for as long as they could. Radiation traces turn heads, but radiation is like smoke in the 20th century. It hangs around a lot of places we forget about. A small reading on a patch of cloth is not a string tied to a conspiracy. It's a note in the margin that says, possible other life exposure. One more oddity in a pile that already feels high enough. So, what remains? A picture of a night that was survivable until it wasn't. A modest snow slab collapse that felt large when you were inside it. A decision made with incomplete information. Get out now. That probably saved lives for minutes and cost them hours later. A march to the trees where a small fire is built. A split into two tasks that both made sense under the conditions. Then the math of exposure and gravity. That explanation, call it the slab collapse cascade, will not satisfy everyone. It's not cinematic. It won't let you summon a monster or secret. But it has the advantage of listening to the small, stubborn facts. The tent still standing but damaged, the cut from inside, the walking line, the first deaths by the fire, the shelter in progress, the injuries that match a fall and compression in a ravine, the long interval that allowed bodies in water and snow to surrender soft tissue in ways that look violent but aren't acts. What about the feeling this case gives you? The bone-deep sense that something still doesn't fit. That is real. You are looking at the limit of winter where the human plan meets the terrain's counterplan. You are looking at a moment when survival knowledge collided with a misread risk. You are looking at a team that did many things right and still lost. There's a reason the files attract physicists and glaciologists and doctors and mountaineers and also ordinary people with ordinary beds who listen to the story in the dark. Dyatlov compresses so many of our quiet fears into one place that you can prepare and still miss the one thing, that you can be brave and still be wrong, that you can hold each other close and still get separated by 100 meters of night. The hikers have become photos on a desk for most of us. For themselves, they were just people trying to stay warm, doing the math on wind and angle, on wood and flame, on minutes and muscle. If you let the noise fall away, the jokes about snowmen, the rumors about lights, the theories escalated for clicks, you are left with a more difficult and more human story. That 9 disciplined walkers were confronted by a chain of winter events and made choices that made sense inside the storm they were living, not the ones we imagine from far away. Close your eyes and listen to that tent, the wind shouldering it, the canvas tapping its poles, the snow settling around its skirt. Hear the quick, practical words as a panel bows and a rib snaps under weight. Feel the temperature at your wrist, the one you used to adjust the stove a few minutes earlier. In that instant, out seems like oxygen. You cut. You leave. You think you will return in 5 minutes when the slab releases and the slope is quiet again. It is the kind of calculation human beings are built to make. It is also the way winter gets you. By asking you to guess, quick. They didn't choose death over safety. They chose what looked like life in the language the night spoke. In the years since, the mountain has kept its silence. People have walked to the tent site and stared at the wind strokes on the snow and tried to hear that language. Some hear panic. Some hear weapons. Some hear something with no face in the trees. But when you weigh what the bodies say, what the prints say, what the canvas and the branches and the ravine say, the most honest thing you can answer back with is this: it was a terrible night, and terrible nights do not need monsters. Remember the names if you can, not because names finish the story, but because they resist turning it into a puzzle only. Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, Rustem Slobodin, Yuri Doroshenko, Yuri Krivonashenko, Alexander Kolovatov, Nikolai Thibault Brignol, Semyon, Alexander Zolotaryov. They were strong, they were careful, they were young, they were loved. If you lie in the dark and wonder what they felt at the last, give them something truer than fear. Give them the steadiness they showed each other. Someone striking a match with hands that won't stop shaking. Someone stacking branches with the last of their breath. Someone turning back uphill toward a flapping sheet of canvas because the thought of warmth was still stronger than the thought of quitting. The mountain did not explain itself. It rarely does. But it is not obliged to be magical in order to be merciless. Sometimes a mystery remains because we mistake the coldness of its math for the presence of a secret. Sometimes all there is weather and snow, and the human urge to stay alive inside both until the very end. That is the Dyatlov Pass incident, as the evidence most stubbornly reads. Not a curse, not a creature, not a cover-up that can survive 60 winters, but the slow tightening of winter's hand, a slab that moved when no one expected it. A decision made in seconds and 9 lives spent with courage in the longest night of their lives. If you need to sleep now, let the wind outside your window be only wind. Let tents remain tents, and let snow stay on distant mountains. In the morning, roads will clear, stoves will light, and the world will be warmer than it was for those who walked out under that sky. Sleep easy for them. They earned that much from us, the courtesy of a quiet ending. This was Midnight Horror Society, dark curiosity for sleep. Until your next midnight session, sleep well.